Emerging slowly from the ashes as I captured the air. Sorrowful millionaire, bondage shedding pain in my tears. Without the fear, false judgment on my shine too strong. Waits too long, war cry song.
My name is Andy L. Brown. For those of you who don't know, I'm the director of the University of Oregon Gospel Choirs and Ensembles. I'm also the executive director of ADOS Oregon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about ADOS Oregon a little bit later. But this section of the event is a bit of a history section. We're going to talk about the history of Eugene and how it has handled the historic black families that came here in the early 1900s. And so it's going to be a surreal, very cerebral conversation and discussion. We have some descendants of those first families who are still here today, and they're going to share their stories with you. And hopefully you learn something, and you're going to probably hear something you've never heard before. And definitely want you to walk away with some new information and a direction on where we should all go in next steps. So they're going to speak in their own words, and at the end, if you have questions, we're going to open up the floor to that as well. So please welcome, come on up. These are descendants of the Johnson, well, this is the Johnson family. And I'm going to kind of moderate this discussion. And like I said at the end, if you have questions, we're going to open the floor up. But first, just a quick, brief history of why we're doing this is because historically, once black families came to Eugene, Eugene was a sundown city, sundown town, actually. It was a town at the time. And that meant that black people were not allowed to live in city limits. So they had to live outside of city limits. That was in the Constitution. And so the black people lived here in Old Baker Park before it was Old Baker Park. This was where the black families lived. And once the city of Eugene decided that this was prime real estate, they wanted to expand city limits, which meant they had to first remove the inhabitants. So homes were destroyed, lives were uprooted, and it has been turmoil ever since because what the city of Eugene decided to do to its first black families. And I'm going to let the family members tell in their own words because they can tell you better than I can. But if you could first introduce yourselves and we will go from there.
How you doing? Is it on?
No.
How you doing? I'm Anthony Johnson.
Can you all hear him?
No.
Hello.
Hello, I'm Anthony Johnson.
Hi, I'm Cindy Johnson Brown. Hi.
No.
Hello. Hi, I'm Rosita Johnson. I'm a third generation Johnson.
Hi, I'm Bettina Johnson Pitts.
All right, so we're going to jump right into the discussion questions. And again, if you have questions, hold them toward the end. And we're going to go right into it. So, how long have you all lived in Eugene?
We've all lived here all of our lives. We were born and raised here.
Okay, and who is the matriarch and the patriarch of the Johnson family?
Charlie Johnson and Bertha Mae Johnson are our grandparents.
And when did they come to Eugene?
In the early 40s. They came in the early 40s, around 42, 43.
Around 42, 43. Oh, but one more thing. I want to make it clear that there were four families that we historically honor. There's the Johnson family, there's the Men's family, there's the Reynolds family, and the Washington family. Unfortunately, Miss Lily Parker Reynolds was unable to make it, and Willie Mims also unable to make it here today due to health reasons. So we hold them in our prayers, and we pray for a speedy recovery for them. But whenever we do this, we do this in representation of all the families, because we are all in the work together for restorative justice and justice being served in recognition. And it's amazing that we're able to do this here at this historic location. And again, thank you all for being here. My next question, can you detail the hardships as a black man and a black woman living in Eugene in the 1940, 1942, 1943? How did this, can you detail their experience if you can?
So, in conversations with our uncle, who actually lived in Tent City, he was saying that it was constant racism in Tent City. There were nice Caucasian people who lived there, but once they left, it made it very hard for all of the people of color who lived there. It made them feel unworthy. They had fear, anxiety, threats of violence, all of that kind of thing. He said the Caucasian people would say, they were so cute when they were, for a black child, when they were small. People would throw bottles, call his mother, our grandmother, names when she would walk to work. She had to have people walk with her to be protected. He didn't graduate high school because of so much oppression until he moved to Portland when he was older. I think he was in his late 20s, early 30s when he moved. He was targeted by the police, constantly stopped. It's close. His third grade teacher, I guess, told him he didn't need math when he asked for help because he was his kind was only going to be porters and cooks. And he said it was very hard to love yourself among so much hate. So
They were unable to get jobs that were adequate to support their families. My grandfather worked at the Eugene Chemical Works where they slaughtered cattle, and my grandmother was a maid. They were unable to get housing. They couldn't live in the city limits. They had lack of health care. They had no child care, and racism and threats and violence and racial profiling.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that history. So how did this struggle? How did it affect their psyche living in Eugene? How did it affect their health?
I know that there was a lot of fear, a lot of depression, a lot of feeling inadequate, not striving to do any better than what you're doing. If you're living, you're fine. If people are leaving you alone, you're fine. Then we speak of like blood pressure problems, not knowing how to eat right, or having access to foods, only scraps. So high blood pressure, heart problems, things like that. I know, for instance, we have or uncles that were born in Tent City. Um, my grandma couldn't get any access to any health care or anything like that. So two of them have some health issues and some mental issues because they couldn't get to the hospital, and so lack of oxygen and things like that. And still to this day, they live in this area. But I know for my grandma, she never caused any problems, and she was one of those that, didn't want to cause a ruckus, just kind of lived low key, and she taught our parents to be that way too, and then in turn it taught us to be that way.
So, going off script here. So you said there were triplets born in Tent City.
Yeah.
So, can you explain to the audience who may not know what is Tent City?
Tent City was this area of which they allowed the black families to live in. Um, they weren't allowed to live anywhere else. They made their own makeshift houses, and at times they would kind of destroy the houses, and then Tent City would have to get moved over off of like West 11th, and then they would come back. And anytime it seemed like that they were progressing, the city and everything evicted them. And that was right after the triplets were born. It was actually in the register guard where they got evicted right after that, because their pictures were in the paper of the first black triplets in Lane County. So then that rose awareness to the members of Lane County, and then they evicted them.
So, just so you know, we're standing in Tent City right now. This is that historical land. And which is why it's very powerful that we're standing here today talking about this history, making it to where it's not history, but it's a shared lived experience that we can't forget. So I appreciate that bit of history. Can you all detail your own experience growing up in Eugene?
Talking with my uncle Jackie and trying to get some more information about our family and stuff, I kind of realized that his growing up, his high school years, or his teenage years weren't too different from mine. You know, he got bullied, got picked on by all the Caucasian kids around just because of the color of his skin. And strangely enough, I felt the same thing growing up around here. You know, it's just it was so shocking of the similarities. You know, like he's like, I always thought it was something that I did, or created. But then talking with him, it made me feel like it was just something we had to deal with around this area that wasn't a part of any of our doing. It was just the way it was. So it was kind of, enlightening or opened my eyes when I figured that out, or, realized that. It was just one of those things that you don't really think is so impactful until you actually hear it. So
My experience was pretty much the same. Us as females, we were not allowed to wear our hair natural. I don't think any of us wore our hair natural until we became adults, because it was not accepted. We were made to feel like we couldn't do that. It brought on so much, what do you want to call it? Just bullying and anger from people, and
We didn't feel empowered.
that's right.
We didn't feel empowered.
We had to fight. We had to fight growing up. Like,
Can you say that?
we had to fight. You could not be soft. You had to be a fighter, like emotionally, physically, all of it. Like, you had to stand your ground, or you'd be taken down, pretty much.
For those of you who may not have heard, she said that she was unallowed to wear her hair naturally how it grew out of her head. Wasn't allowed to do that in school for fear of bullying or some kind of retaliation from teachers, I assume. And would you say that from the time that your family moved here in the 40s, to your upbringing that much has changed, or has it been kind of the same?
Definitely the same.
I think the only thing that kept us going is that our parents raised us to love ourselves, and nobody's going to love you unless you love yourself. So we learned to self love ourselves. So because we weren't getting that inside of the public schools, even within the public schools, there was nice teachers and there was teachers that you could tell that didn't like you, and so they were not kind. And so if we complained enough, my mom would go to school and she'd handle that. Then they decided to be nice.
My Uncle Jackie brought up a point. I asked him about how the food and stuff and the nutrition affected them growing up, and he made a point where it wasn't the food that had nothing to do with it. They celebrated when they had food. That brought everybody together, and that was a time where they could kind of release their all the anxiety or whatever and just eat food. And it was more of a celebration when they ate. It was because they were celebrating the fact that they were eating and just letting go of a lot of things that they could at that time. He talked about how he loved putting on my grandpa's work boots, and at that time they would always get out the pots and pans and make music because my grandpa could play any kind of guitar, and so they just all learned how to like play music at that time and have a celebration during food time. So it was pretty cool.
How would a more peaceful and inclusive upbringing have changed your life experience here in Eugene?
I asked my Uncle Jackie that, and he said he would have been king he would have been king of Eugene if things were different, because it definitely would have had a lot more avenues opened up for him and stuff like that. But he said he would have been king of Eugene.
I think we just would have felt more included, and not so much of being on the outside looking in. We would have been on the inside looking out.
So did this experience, how has it affected, as you see your family, many of them not living here in Eugene, would you say that's as a result of the treatment you received here? So how so?
I personally moved away for 15 years, but roughly 10 to 15 years. I was in my early 20s and I got tired of the way that I was treated, being pulled over all the time, and I've never even got arrested before. Don't even really have tickets other than the fact that I liked to speed when I was like 21. Everybody did, but I didn't understand what was happening. Even I have 2 daughters who were born here, and I remember taking them to Head Start of Lane County, one of the Head Starts, and I went to go pick up my daughter, and they wouldn't let me have her. They said that she smelled funny, and they didn't know why she smelled like that. And I asked them what was happening, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" They were like, "Well, she smells funny," and they had a lot of head lice running through the school, so I put a lot of grease and stuff in her hair, and I was trying to explain to them that was just grease. And that was a whole big thing where they were like, "Well, no, we don't know what that smell is." And I said, "Well, it's just tea tree oil. It's nothing else." And just in general, I got so tired of it, tired of not being able to rent housing the way that I needed to. I didn't even know that it didn't change. I remember my mom saying, like, she had to go and rent the houses for us. We couldn't come as kids. And my dad couldn't be there either because they wouldn't rent to us. And not being able to, like, run around and play outside because we didn't want too many people to see us. For me, it hasn't changed too much. Even when I moved back over here, I rented my places from offline. And then once they seen us, they were like, "Can we see IDs? Like, how do you guys make your money?" Things like that. And that was, that's 2018, and that's a lot. I probably wouldn't have moved back here if it wasn't for my family. And the fact that I have 8 brothers and sisters here. But it's been a lot. There's not too much difference. I mean, even in employment, I am always the one who the speaks to the people who have any type of color in them, you know, or anything like that. They're like, hey, Bettina, you speak to them. And I'm like, why can't you speak to them? Well, they'll deal with you better because, you know, you're black. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, and that's 2021, we're still dealing with that. And I mean, I had to leave here to get education because I didn't feel like, I felt like, hey, I'm good. I can pay my bills. I can do what I need to do. But it didn't make any sense. And I didn't want my kids to be here. I didn't want my kids getting notes in their lockers. I didn't want my kids having teachers say things to them or anything like that, or suspecting that, you know, maybe I couldn't take care of them when we've always been taken care of.
I think that's very powerful what you said, and I really appreciate you sharing that. That's very personal. We as Eugene, Lane County in general, we have to be better. We should not allow ourselves to feel comfortable living in a community that makes a family feel so unwelcome that they want to leave our community. And that's historically what Eugene Springfield has done. And I really appreciate you all coming and sharing your story. And, you know, we've only had a limited amount of time, so we really only scratched the surface. But I wonder, are there any questions of anybody who've heard what was spoken? Any questions at all? Anything that's unclear? Yes.
There were about there was about 5 to 7 black families and about 9 to 12 white families. And my uncle Jackie expressed to me that he never knew what racism was when he was in Tin City, when he lived there as a little boy. He didn't really understand what it was until they got forced out in 49, July 16th of 49, when the city forced everybody out. And then once they went across the river, Ferry Street Bridge into the city, that's when he learned about it at the age of like 9 to 10, when it really started hitting him and understanding that. But before that, he said there were lots of white families in there, and they treated it, it was a community. They worked together to get food and do things together. And he didn't experience that until he went over the Ferry Street Bridge.
Excellent question. Are there any other questions? Yes, please. What advice do you have? What advice do you have for future generations of people of color living in Eugene?
Go ahead, Bettina.
We all have kids. My oldest is 21, and I'm always telling my kids and everyone else, and I work with kids, that you are worth it. You are worthy. You are everything that you could ever be. And don't allow anyone to say anything else to you. You're equal to everyone, and just keep pushing. You have to show people that you are worthy, and no matter what it is, just keep fighting, because we're going to be fighting forever. I fight now, and you know, I'm 40, and we just keep fighting, you know. And I'm always telling people, like, you are everything. You're number one. You are beautiful. You are amazing. And just keep on putting that into these kids' head, because I work with teenagers and they are so angry. They come from like the Lane County area, they come from the Portland area, and they were born knowing racism. They were born and they have so much hatred in them, and they don't even know why. And so I know for me, I'm always telling them, like, you're amazing, and you just don't see. I want you to see what I see. And no matter what, do not let someone take you out of your character. Do not let someone make you anything else other than who you are. Don't let them change you. Do not make them make you angry. And never fight with your fists unless you have to. because they're not only going to throw the book at you, they're going to throw the whole jail at you. And that is still to this day. I mean, Measure 11, even though it doesn't exist anymore, it still does. Minorities get punished harder than, Caucasians. And that's just what that is.
I agree with my cousin as well, but I will also say, um, get involved in even the smallest way, like your families, just bring them all together, do things together, stand up and take a stand. And when you see things, step up and say something. Don't just let it continue happening. It'll continue to happen. And, I'm also a third generation Johnson. My children are, I'm not going to tell you my age, but they're older. They're like Tony said, they're going through the same things that our um, matriarch and patriarch went through, and their children. Unfortunately, I'm praying that they're not going to have to go through that. That Lane County and Eugene, Oregon, is going to step up and make some changes. So just please take a stand, do what you can.
Absolutely. We're running low on time, so I want to thank you all for coming and sharing your story, and just giving us a little bit of insight on what you've experienced. Um, I, I had one more question, but you kind of answered it. um, so can we give the Johnson family a round of applause for being open and sharing with us their experience and helping us to be better. Now, the best thing that we can do, it would be a slap in the face if we, after hearing their story and their experience, and they've been so kind to be open and sharing this with us, that we do nothing afterward. That would be a major slap in the face. So it takes a community to build a great community. So it's on all of us to make this a better place that's all inclusive for all people, especially people of color, especially black people who historically have not been welcomed in this city. It, it takes a community to make the change happen. We're speaking with the city council. When recess is over to to make that restoration happen. And we need everybody's support. This is not a one person or one family ordeal. It takes the whole community to make a better community that we all would be happy and proud to live in. So again, thank you all for being here. And there's always something we can do. Spread the word, share, educate one another.